This prefaces a series of talks which are centered on natural human acts. And since nothing is more indicative of human acts than speculative and practical knowledge, the talks begin by investigating how it is that we know anything and will anything, and the importance of properly comprehending those operations, which are essential to all that are principally human acts. To that end, these talks shall explore the primary questions of how do we acquire knowledge, and what is the purpose of knowledge. To answer those questions, the talks also begin by asking, what do we mean by human knowledge? And following upon those considerations, they take up the issue of judgment. Since knowledge is an act of the reason with relation to the thing known, and reason directs all human acts in accordance with what it knows, and those directions come by choices concerning what is to be done and what is to be avoided, as all of man's subsequent acts are directed by his knowledge. For when we are deficient in our ability to reason properly, we are stunted in knowledge and thereby enslaved to many errors. This brutal subjection may lead to violence in our dealings with others, born of the frustration brought on by being deprived of the possibility of exercising good judgments. This deficiency in reasoning may also instill in us an apathy which inclines us to slothfully defer judgment to another who is no more knowledgeable than ourselves, so that we either avoid responsibility for our own actions or neglect to act at all when we are required to do so. And judgment is that by which we discern right from wrong. So if that act is deficient, it generates many errors which render us miserable, since we are unable to judge rightly about that which will lead to happiness, which is the attainment of the perfect good. And all knowledge ought to be directed to its proper ultimate end, which is knowledge of the supreme good, or we are impeded from happiness by the vice of curiosity, which is the desire for the attainment of knowledge for temporal ends alone. By excluding this exalted end, we will eventually fall into a general malaise, having lost a comprehension of the purpose for having any knowledge at all, intoxicated by a combination of despair and presumption, which are fellow travelers accompanying arrogance and ignorance. Many will begin to invent something having only the appearance of knowledge, and demand that others submit to its unrealistic demands. But our pursuit of knowledge must also be proportionate to our capacity for its acquisition, because if we attempt to know that which is beyond our ability, we can deceive ourselves by making judgments about that of which we are wholly ignorant, and thereby be led to destructive consequences. So to render any equitable judgment, we must know truth from falsity and good from evil within our capacity to know such things. And to do that, we must know what truth is in order to judge whatsoever is opposed to it. And we must know what good is in order to judge what is not good. By engaging in this pursuit, we can hopefully accommodate ourselves to a more thorough understanding of human nature, which will surely be to our greatest advantage if we remain faithful to this rewarding and worthwhile investigation, for no occupation can bring greater happiness than the acquisition of every truth that brings us to the sovereign truth. In so doing, we may replace disorder with order and misery with tranquility. And much of our distress comes from being inordinately absorbed by material gratifications to the exclusion of higher pursuits. Mental discipline is essential to repelling fixations on the corporeal and elevating the mind to know that which is immaterial. As long as we are inordinately engrossed by corporeal things, we are incapable of controlling our passions and are thereby enslaved by them. Knowing how to think is the only natural means by which anyone can be released from that slavery and begin to understand the distinction between the immaterial and material orders and the dependence of the material upon the immaterial for its existence and its function. To shed some light on this, it can be said that while what is material is known by sense, what is immaterial is known by intelligence. That is because what is material comes under some sort of appearance, while what is immaterial comes under some concept. Within this context, the immaterial refers to the concept which is abstracted by intelligence from appearance, and that concept is principal to the identity of the thing known, because it is by that concept that the thing which appears to the knower is known. Nevertheless, this immaterial principle does not exist apart from the thing except in the mind of the knower. But it does accurately correspond to the thing known, since it is derived directly from it. The thing I perceive is the actual thing I perceive, which determines my perception of it, or else I don't know it, but rather hold a false idea, which is what is meant by error. By this process we can begin to understand what things truly are, and in that way we are protected from errors about ourselves and all other things. In so doing, we are led onward to some comprehension of higher things, which are first in the order of things of which they are the cause. Inasmuch as anything exists, it is good. Inasmuch as it is good, it is knowable. Inasmuch as it is knowable, it is desirable. For no one can desire that which he does not know. The principal affection of the will is love, without which there can be no joy in gaining knowledge and no sadness at being deprived of it. But that begs the question of what is rightly and wrongly loved. And that question leads us back to the pursuit of an understanding of knowledge, because the will is the mind's appetite for good, and so love is the movement of the will to what the mind perceives as good. And since the mind can mistake what is evil for good, then the will can love evil rather than good by believing the evil to be good. And such acts come under consideration of the general science known as morality or ethics, which examines acts directed to some practical end by reason. And while good acts are in accordance with reason, evil acts are against reason.